Welcome to Sabbath School Daily. This quarter we have been studying from this lesson, Psalms. This week we're studying from the last lesson of the quarter, which is lesson 13, which has the title, Wait on the Lord, and today is Sunday's lesson. The title for today is The Call of Waiting. Today's lesson begins by encouraging you to read several texts that will provide context for what we're going to be talking about. These texts are Psalm 27 verse 14, Psalm 37 verse 7, 9, and 34, Psalm 39 verse 7, Psalm 40 verse 1, Psalm 69 verse 6, Galatians 5 verse 5, and Romans 8 verse 18 through 25. And then it gives you the question, what do these texts implore God's people to do? So the lesson today has to do with these texts, and it follows up that question by saying, perhaps one of the greatest stresses in life is the stress of waiting. No matter who we are, wherever we live, whatever our station in life is, we all at times must wait for things. From waiting in line in a store to waiting to hear a medical prognosis, we wait, which we don't always like doing, do we? I've always had a hard time waiting. I've never liked waiting. Since I was a child, I wanted things immediately. And it seems as though as I got older, it got even worse. I remember the first time that I ordered something on Amazon and I found out that I would have to wait 2 or 3 days, and that was unbearable to me. Luckily nowadays I've gotten used to the fact that we have, overnight shipping and 1 day or 2 days later, but it still reveals that we don't like waiting. We want things immediately. Especially today, we have, the culture of Google where we can just go and find answers online in a matter of seconds. People can be fact-checked immediately. We live in the culture of the immediate, of the right now. We want things for yesterday, and we want them the way we want them, when we want them. But that's not the true reality of life, is it? We have to wait in life for several things. As the lesson just said, there are several instances where we have to wait. And especially when it comes to waiting on the Lord, we have to learn how to do that because it doesn't come naturally to us, especially in this day and age. The lesson then goes on to say, what then about waiting for God? The notion of waiting on the Lord is found not only in the Psalms, but abounds all through the Bible. The operative word in all this is perseverance. Perseverance is our supreme commitment of refusing to succumb to fear of disappointment that somehow God will not come through for us. God's devoted child waits, knowing with certainty that God is faithful, and those who wait on Him can trust that if we leave our situation to Him, we can be sure that He will work it out for our best, even if at the time we don't necessarily see it that way. Learning to trust God has a lot to do with waiting on Him, with allowing Him to be God in our life and allowing Him to do things in His own time. Not that there's anything that we can do that can speed God up or slow Him down. He's going to do whatever He's going to do, the way that He's going to do it. But when we are able to sync our minds, to sync our trust, to sync our wills with God, that makes life so much easier because then we're not waiting for something to happen anymore. We're just waiting for God to work as He knows best. That is one of the hardest things in life, but once we learn it, it's also one of the most comforting things in life. Because at that point, we understand, we acknowledge that we are not in control, that He's in control, and that just makes things a lot easier, because then we're not trying to control things that are out of our control. Do you see the conundrum that we place ourselves in? Sometimes we want to be in control, we want to do things a certain way, and we're under the illusion that everything happens because we do something or we don't do something. No, the truth is that any minor detail, any minor error, any, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, anything like that can reveal very fast that we are not truly in control of much. The lesson then says this, waiting on the Lord is more than just hanging on. It is a deep longing for God that is compared to intense thirst in a dry land. The psalmist waits on many blessings from God, but his yearning to be brought close to his God surpasses any other desire and need in life. The understanding that we are not in control and the surrendering of our will daily to God, it produces a more relational relationship with the Lord. Because at that point, we're not really looking for Him to do things primarily, but to just be Him in our life. It makes us long for Him, long for relationship with Him, long for moments of communion with Him, because then we know that we are within His will. So you see that the purpose of all of this, of waiting on God, it's not only for the things that we want Him to do. And honestly, it shouldn't be about that primarily. It should be about spending time with him, about having life or sharing life with God. At that point, you truly become God's child. And that's the whole goal here. The goal is for us to be able to wait upon the Lord, to trust in him, to rely on him as children rely on their parents. The lesson then says, as we read in Paul in this amazing passage in Romans, God and the whole creation are waiting for the renewal of the world and the blessed meeting of God and his people at the end of time. He writes, "For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God." What an incredible promise. Yet, while we are waiting for that ultimate salvation and reunion with God, even as the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs, the Lord still abides with his people now through the Spirit. The beauty of what was just said here is that there is a certain transcendence in how we relate to God. There's this contrast between what we hope for and what we already have, for the in the future and the already here. And what that contrast is the fact that while we wait for the Lord to make all things new, when he comes back, when he renews the world, when he takes us to heaven, we can also already breathe the airs of heaven here in the world right now, because we can already live in communion with Jesus right now. And ultimately, in the Bible, if there's one thing that's revealed, is that the kingdom of heaven, which is a phrase that is so often found on the lips of Christ, the kingdom of heaven, it's not really primarily a geographical location. It's a relationship with the King of Heaven. And so while we're not there, while we're not experiencing immortality and the new body and the house that he's made for us and the food of heaven and the relationships of heaven and all the things that heaven promises, we can already have the greatest part of heaven, which is the companionship of Jesus Christ, the King of Heaven. So we have that hope of the hereafter, of heaven, of kingdom come, but at the same time, we already live in a relationship with Christ, or at least we can, if we wait on him, if we trust him to be the centerpiece of our life. The lesson then concludes by saying, meanwhile, we are called to bear witness to the plan of salvation, which will culminate in a new creation. That new creation is ultimately what we are waiting for, the final fulfillment of our hopes as Adventist Christians, whose very name, Adventist, contains the idea of the hope that we await. We wait, but we know that it is not in vain. Christ's death and resurrection at the first coming is our surety of his second coming. That's what it means to be a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, to wait the coming of Jesus, and to live that coming now, while we wait, extending it to other people, sharing with them the beautiful hope that we have, that this world is not the final place of God's people, that this world right here will end with all its cruelty, with all its horror, with all its pain and suffering. It will end. The lesson finally finishes with a question. What are some things you are waiting for now from God? How do we learn to wait in faith and in trust, especially when what we are praying for hasn't yet come? That has a lot to do with understanding that God will answer all prayers. He answers it in a series of ways. Sometimes he says yes, sometimes he says no, sometimes he says not now or later. But the truth is that God answers all prayers. And the secret is in learning to let him do whatever he's going to do and just staying tranquil and calm, not living in an anxious state of mind, thinking that there's something that we can do to convince God to listen to us now rather than at some other period of time. So keep that in mind. Please remember to study your lesson. Read the texts that are mentioned here today. There are several of them, but they will help you understand what this topic is all about. Also, please remember to comment down below. I love hearing from you. And also remember to like, to share, and to subscribe to our videos. We release one every day. And I hope to see you again here tomorrow for another Sabbath School Daily.